Withstand the economic crisis. What can businesses do to survive and thrive through COVID-19 and beyond? Today, Money Matters leads businesses on the path to recovery, revitalize and reform after the storm. Hello there, I'm Zahir Kelvinong Abdullah and you're watching TV3's flagship business program, Money Matters. Joining me in the studio this week is Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs Minister, Datuk Seri Alexander Nanta Linggi. Datuk Seri, it's a pleasure having you on Money Matters.
Thank you very much.
Can I start off by asking you that the biggest challenge for your ministry in terms of tackling what's happening right now during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, well, as I said, this is coming to the first anniversary of the government. So at that time, 1 year ago, immediately after being put into, as a minister in this ministry, we were faced with something that we've never faced before. There's a COVID-19 pandemic. And on March 18, 2020, the MCO was imposed. Of course, without ever had an experience like that, it's something new for me, new for my deputy, new for the entire crew or rather ministry officers that we were facing, likewise other ministries as well. So in our ministry, the very first thing that we found, the task that we had to handle was panic buying. People became very panicky, and there were rushes to the shops to buy provisions, and very soon we have complaints and put to us about shelves empty in some places. Essentials were not available, especially on face masks. If you remember, there was a big issue about that. And even though prices were capped at maximum 80 cents per piece, if you go to the shop, they said not available, but we offered to buy at 5 ringgit, suddenly it became available. So there were these kind of situations, and also the bit of confusions, yeah, because when the MCO was imposed, people didn't really know how to get about because everything was disrupted, if you remember. And this ministry deals with distributive trade, yeah. So there's a lot to do with getting supplies, essentials and non-essentials, whatever is being sold in the retail. The retail is under us, peruncitan. There was just simply a big disruptions in the system at that time, in the early days of the MCO. So the biggest task was to make sure there were no panic buying and to make sure supplies get into the shelves and to make sure that other essentials like sanitizations, products, for the people at that time who needed the most were short of supplies.
Right.
So we visited factories and make sure and find out from them whether they could really replenish the supplies and things like that.
Right.
That was the biggest challenge.
Looking forward, Datuk Seri, the Movement Control Order MCO this time around especially has hit Kuala Lumpur, Selangor, Johor and Pulau Pinang, and it has been extended to March the 4th. So obviously these 4 states represent a big portion of the economy. So analysts say that this could affect 2021's first quarter's GDP. So can I get you to comment on that?
I think that's right, because we all know that these states that you've just mentioned are the concentration of our populations. Yeah? That means the consumption are there. And then also, these are the states where many factories and business premises are located. And that means not only the businesses, but also people involved in the employment. There are thousands, if not millions of people concentrating in these 4 states. Penang, as you mentioned, Selangor, in the Wilayah, and then also Johor. So it is only reasonable to expect that the economy is affected. However, I like to share some information where, from our past experience, that despite the movement control order as such, the wholesale and retail trade sector in 2020 itself generated a total of 1.2 trillion ringgit in sales, with total revenue generated by this sector, the wholesale retail trade, F&B, and accommodation services sector recorded at 351.3 billion for quarter 4 2020. Yeah, that's the last quarter of 2020. In December alone, in the year 2020, we call it WRT, this wholesale retail trade, in Malaysia recorded a total of 115.5 billion ringgit in sales value in just 1 month. So that means that the economy is still vibrant in that sense, even though we were affected by MCOs, CMCOs, and the other variants of the MCOs. So because of that, I think there is this indicative of resilience of the business community to be able to bounce back from the early half of the MCO 1.0.
Right.
Yeah.
Datuk Seri, let me just interrupt you here. We've got to go very quick commercial break, but when I come back, I'll definitely get you to continue, especially talking about reopening businesses and basically digital economy. So we're going for a short break, and when we return, we'll talk about the boom in online sales, as mentioned earlier, amid the pandemic. And before that, find us on Twitter and share your thoughts on the discussion so far. Thank you for staying with us on Money Matters this Saturday evening. If you're just joining us, we're speaking to Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs Minister, Datuk Seri Alexander Nanta Linggi. Datuk Seri, can we add on to what you were saying before the commercial break, that the decision to reopen economic sectors obviously has been very welcomed by everyone, but people also have been advised to stay at home to break the chain of infection while shops are allowed to stay open. So how can we find a balance for this?
Yeah, we simply need to find a balance. I think initially we had to focus on our safety. Yeah, we have to stay at home to break the chain, but then it couldn't go on. So the need to reopen the economy was decided, because at the end of the day, the economy will ensure people to continue to live a normal and comfortable life with incomes, earnings, and the bit of normalcy back. But we have to live with a new norm, all right? So that's why what's been called now always is the normal baru, or the new normal. The decision to open is not easy, but we realize that, I mean, the government realized that, the Prime Minister realized that there's no choice but have to reopen, because people have to have an opportunity to continue with their business. And when they continue with business, what is going to be assured is business will remain, profit will ensure livelihood for the business owners. At the same time, the business will also then continue to provide for the employment, meaning to say less people will lose their job. Already there were so many jobs lost actually, and to keep job is important, because workers who need their employment, their jobs, to put food on the table for their family, to make it very simple. At the same time, we are a trading country anyway. So there's no other way apart from opening our economy for economic recovery strategies. So it cut across. In fact, it wasn't easy when we have to argue about which is our priority. Is it that we really have to remain closed for much longer to make sure that we are 100% rid of the COVID-19? Well, that would not be possible. Then what do? Then we found out that we can go back to a bit of normalcy if we adhere to the SOPs, stringent SOPs. That is why when the reopening of the economy, for us, a subsector of retail, seems very important. We impose very stringent SOPs. And that proven, as far as we are concerned, KPDNHEP are concerned, we have facts and figures. Those under our sector, we have very high compliance, we make a lot of inspections on those that are under our jurisdiction, the distributive trade and the retails. Just to give you an example, inspections, about 357,489 inspections were done. Yeah, the compliance is 97.6%, meaning to say, yang patuh kepada SOP yang kita ada, ataupun what I meant is people who complied with our SOPs, 349,204. Our approach with our enforcement officers, we don't want to be harsh. So we have a soft approach by first advising them. If we found that they are not complying, we say, that's why we have 7,604 cases of advising those we found in the first place who did not adhere or obey the SOP.
Right.
And then we issue a caution, reprimand them. 582 cases that we reprimand. We only compound yang berdegil tu, those who are a bit stubborn. So we only compound, only 112 compound we issue the entire period of last year, when we are under this 342 acts, or the MCOs. Yeah?
Right. But you mentioned just now that you did do a lot of engagement with retailers and all that. So looking at the ministry's engagement with retailers, shopping complex owners, business associations and marketplace in the country, what other new areas can be explored to spur domestic consumption besides the Buy Malaysian Products campaign, which was launched last year by you?
Number one, the engagement was necessary because we have to know, we have to have a feedback from the industry players themselves of various categories. And I think it worked out very well for both them and us, we as a regulator, them as the industry player. And I think it is welcome effort by both Kementerian and also the industry players, the various group of them. And what do we do, as you mentioned, with the after what do you call it, the engagement with them? We use their feedback for us as information to convince the top management committee of the MCO to say that these sectors can be open because this is the what we agree. SOPs will be adhered and obeyed by this sector.
Right.
So this is important. Now, if you remember, by the time it was June last year, we realized that things were getting better. That is why in middle of July 2020, we launched the campaign Beli Barangan Malaysia, KBBM. It is not just a matter of launching a program per se, but it was to revitalize the retail industry.
Right, to revitalize the retail industry.
Yes.
We just hold that thought for a minute. We've just got to go for a short breather. Find us on Twitter and let us know your thoughts on the discussion on today's program. And we'll see you soon. Welcome back. You're watching Money Matters, and we have with us the Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs Minister, Datuk Seri Alexander Nanta Linggi. Datuk Seri, continuing where you left off just now about the Buy Malaysian campaign and revitalizing the community.
Yeah, in fact, we have two programs, campaign Beli Barangan Malaysia, buy Malaysian product, and one is campaign Jualan Malaysia, that is buy Malaysian also product, but not necessarily made in Malaysia. Now, these two programs are simply to revitalize the sector, because we want to encourage that time people to come out and buy, yeah? Because after a while under MCOs, there were this move towards people not coming out to buy, and therefore there's a problem when the retail not being patronized as much. People, they have shifted to the e-commerce and doing things online. Now, that's another matter. So revitalizing is important because if you realize that the domestic trade is very, very important to the economy. It contributes a lot to the domestic, gross domestic GDP. Yeah. So revitalizing is a very important aspect because, as I said earlier on, it ensures the business to be sustained, and also it ensures employment to be still available.
Right.
Yep.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned e-commerce as well, because the pandemic has forced many businesses to embark on e-commerce. So how do we ensure a complete adoption of e-commerce in the country? Because a lot of the retailers that you have mentioned
hasten, if you like, speed up the need to really embrace the e-commerce. So what happened was, to say complete adoption, in the word, I would not say whether there's going to be a complete adoption yet, because there's still the need to have the more conventional, traditional, brick and mortar kind of
yes.
people get to enjoy going to the shops and make their choices. But no doubt, this sector, e-commerce, doing business, will be increasing. And rightfully, just a few days ago, the Prime Minister has launched digitalization blueprint for the whole country, where e-commerce will have to depend on, with doing things through internet and with digital technology and things like that. And we see the trend. Therefore, what I am also emphasizing now in this ministry, in fact, just last week we had a retreat and we brainstormed going forward for the ministry. One of the things that we highlight is we want to make sure that our enforcement officers are updated in their skill and in their capability to handle issues and problems that are getting more sophisticated when people do e-commerce transactions. For instance, fraudulent transactions are getting more complicated, sophisticated, and people are cheating through, in so many other ways through online. And therefore, to tackle these kind of problems, our enforcement division, to me, has to be given much more empowerment through knowledge and new technology.
Right.
So this is important aspect that I want the ministry, in terms of enforcement, in terms of supervision aspect of our responsibility of the ministry.
Right. Okay, got it. Looking at some matters which basically affects the rakyat more than anything else, petroleum prices, so to speak. So the upward trend in petroleum product prices following the higher demand for crude oil, basically in line with the reopening of various economic sectors around the world. The ceiling price for RON 95 and diesel, is the ministry now looking at whether to maintain or change it, or do we need a new ceiling price?
Yeah, in this matter, what has to be fully understood by the public is, number one, it is not us, KPDNHEP, or the Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, that fix that ceiling price. It is not us. It is the Ministry of Finance. We assume a responsibility on enforcement to see that, dealings or selling of these petroleum products in the market are not subject to fraudulent practices as such. So setting the ceiling price will be done by MOF or Ministry of Finance, and they will tell us this is the ceiling price. All right? Now, we all understand, we should know that for Malaysia, it's been said that for every $1 increase, US dollar increase in the Brent crude oil, it brings us 300 million ringgit of extra income. So if we balance this, while we understand that people do not want to pay more for the fuel they use for their cars or diesel they use, but in the bigger picture, the country benefit, because we earn more ringgit in terms of foreign income or foreign exchange. Income that we get from increase in Brent oil, crude oil price.
Right. So basically, it's like striking a balance.
Yeah.
Okay. So final question before we go, Datuk Seri. Now, speaking of the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, there's now more optimism than fear, because it was just 3 days ago that the Prime Minister launched the nation's largest ever immunization program to combat the pandemic. So what are your views as far as Malaysia is concerned with the vaccine rollout? Because the Prime Minister has described the vaccine campaign as a ray of hope.
Yeah, it is, I think, really a ray of hope, because with these vaccinations, if we do it well, according to our NIP, that's the National Immunization Program or Plan, we hope that we will be back to normalcy in our lives. So meaning to say that if immunization is a success, then we can do away with those typical stringent MCOs and variants of MCOs that we have to go through now, because we cannot control the spread of COVID-19. Therefore, vaccination of our people is very important. So I believe that majority of our people welcome it, although I do hear of news, or I don't know whether it's rumors, but people are saying that some people do not want to be vaccinated because they believe go for the vaccinations. It will help us to come back or go back to what we were once. We could travel out, we could enjoy more things that we cannot enjoy in the last 1 year because of strict MCOs.
Thank you. Datuk Seri, on that note, thank you very much for being on Money Matters. It's been a real pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We'll be back the same day, same time next week for another discussion with more money insights that matter. Until then, I'm Zahir Kelvinong Abdullah. Bye for now and stay safe.